Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Primer Chats with Dr. Sandi Webster and Audrey D. Lloyd. In fact, this is our sixth Primer Chats, and we designed, yes, it's our sixth Primer Chat.
I didn't realize that. We're getting up there in numbers.
We're building momentum. And we designed Primer Chats to prime individuals for success. Today, I am excited to talk about a subject matter that's near and dear to my heart, negotiating. And, I want to say a little bit about myself, and then I'll pass it to you in regards to background in negotiation. So I started my career very early in insurance. I know, as a journalism major. The lure of the money in going into insurance was bigger than the lure of getting into journalism. But anyway, I used my journalistic skills to my benefit. But in that job, I negotiated a lot. In fact, I worked at American International Group on Pine and Wall Street and negotiated multi-million-dollar cases. And so I am very skilled at negotiation. And we're going to talk a little bit about your background as well, Sandi, but I wanted to tee up this question for our lovely audience. What do financial transactions, negotiating job offers, and everyday decisions all have in common? It's rhetorical for them, but I'd like to pass it to you, Sandi, to hear what you have to say along with an introduction of your background as well.
Absolutely. I mean, negotiation is the thing that they have in common. We're negotiating all the time in every aspect of our lives. And I didn't learn the negotiation skill in a formal way like you did in corporate. I worked in corporate too. That's where we met. But I never had to do the big negotiations because we had teams of people who would just go in, and that's their job, right, is to negotiate. So when I started my business, Peggy and I realized we never did sales, which is a big part of that is negotiation. We did our smaller negotiations, like with your employees and giving them appraisals and negotiating their salaries for them. But once you start getting employees, it's a whole different kind of negotiation that you're doing. And when you have to go on a sales call, that's a whole different kind of negotiation that you're doing. And we negotiate little things and big things, but that's how I got my chops. I hired someone to teach me how to negotiate and all the levers you need to pull. And I have to say, we got pretty good at it and grew our business. Can't complain.
Oh, absolutely. Proof is in the pudding. And what's great about our duo is that we have the art and science of negotiation, right? Yes, absolutely. So, Sandi, where should we start? I wonder. My mind says to go to, in order to be a great negotiator, we have to know ourselves, right? And so when I say know yourself, it's really, what do you value? And what are your values? And I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? In terms of that's really the platform that I think, whether we know it consciously or subconsciously, that we operate under those two things that drive us, our values and what we value.
That's a big order because a lot of people don't know their values. Mm-hmm. They never took the time to write down their values. If they're asking, what are your company's values? They don't know. And if you didn't do that pre-work, it makes it even more difficult walking into a negotiation as to what you'll take and what you won't take, or what's, when something's offered to you, like, how does that sit with you, right? How does that sit in your heart? Is that a part of the value that you have for your company and for yourself? And I've been in deals where someone makes a suggestion or wanted to go, and I'm like, no, that's just not part of how we work. And at that point, it's up to you, right? To either move forward with somebody that's not part of your value, or you try to get them to understand something that's a part of your value system.
You make an excellent point, Sandi. So I think people use their values and value every day, what they value every day, but they don't recognize and haven't named it. And that's why, if they're listening, I'm delighted that they're here, because you said something that's really important. If you haven't recognized and named how you operate, it's worthy to take time, pause, to say, these are the things that are important to me. And what I heard you say also is that even in the approach to negotiating with someone, if your values are not honored or out of alignment, you no go, right?
That's right. Walk away.
Walk away. And the same applies to me, that if I feel that this is not a person that is forthright, perhaps, or it's playing games, or it's a bait and switch, I don't care how great it is. I don't care how much I want it. No, thank you.
And it can be hard. It can be hard. And walking away is a tough thing, and we'll talk more about that. But it can be very difficult when you need a contract. You have nothing, right? And this is someone offering you something. And you sit there and you start debating with yourself, like, can I make this adjustment to my value to take this? Because I need food on my table. I have employees I need to support. So should I just close my eyes and turn my head and look the other way? And if you're that person, you will. We have an ex-president who's coming up for, didn't come up, he's been indicted because his values were just not aligned with the job that he had, right? And so that's the outcome when you don't align your values. You wind up doing things that you can get sued for, that you're not happy with. Your employees will be miserable. Everyone will be miserable. So just think about that really hard. I think it's an important thing you have to do.
It's an important thing. And I love this because I feel like I'm learning in the moment just from what you're saying. Because you know what? You brought up a very great question. Can we, should we negotiate even within our values? Now, I don't have an answer for that because I'm still thinking. However, what I would say is that that's why there's negotiation as well, right? For us to serve up, this is what I'm thinking, this is where I stand, and to hear what the other side has to say, right? So in the offline, you brought a great point around know yourself, but also know who you're dealing with on the other side.
Absolutely.
So let me pause to let you in on that one.
Well, before I go in to negotiate, I need to know a little bit more about the person that I'm dealing with, that I'm going to be negotiating with. And Peggy, my ex-business partner, she's a mistress. I can't say master. She's a mistress of this. Peggy will do the research on you if she knows who she's meeting with. She'll look at what college you went to, what's your dog's name? Like Fifi, we used to laugh and say, did you ask about Fifi? But she does the research. And so she understands when she walks into that room with that person, exactly who she's talking to. Is this person a decision maker? Or am I just giving them information? They're going to impart my information to some other party who's going to say, no, I don't like that. No, let's try to get in front of the decision maker, or have that person in the room at the same time. Or if you know they're not going to be in the room, give them the information they need to give to that person, right? So you have to really know what level is this person? Do they have signing ability and signing off that money? If you're a manager, you know the threshold. We were in corporate. We know you have a threshold that you can't go above, and somebody else will have to sign off on it. It could get turned down. That person could love you, but when they take it up the notch, we have our own people. How many times did you hear that? We have our own people. Sorry.
I love that because reconnaissance matters, right? And what you were indicating that Peggy does is brilliant because you're absolutely right. You have to gather information to truly know who you're dealing with. Not only does it help in building rapport, but also you know what's going to ring their bell, delight them,
Yeah.
wrinkle their nose, turn them off, right? But also you know what buttons to push. And I don't mean that in an annoying way, but what's going to get their attention in that negotiation, whether it's in the job offer, whether you're negotiating your real estate, whether you're negotiating with your kids, you still need to know the same type of information that's valuable.
How is it going to benefit them? How is this deal that we put on this table going to benefit you? And I talked about it offline in another section, but right here, I can say that, I'll give you an example. When we used to go into negotiate with, let's say, directors or senior VP level, what pushes their button? They are always looking to get promoted. Always. No matter what level. Managers, they're worker bees. They're doing it. The director and VP level are always looking for that rating, right? Your appraisal rating. They want that 1 or 2 to get that bonus, right? And we learn that, and we'll always say, whatever you do, we will make sure that we will deliver on this project so that you get a 1 or 2 rating. That's almost like a promise that we make, that when we leave here, you will get promoted or get a fantastic rating. If you don't get promoted from that, it's not our fault, right?
I love that, Sandi. We're going to talk a little bit in the back half about win-win, but what you're serving up here is what's in it for them, right? What's in it for them. And, I'll say this, many people view negotiation as a battle, but it's not a battle. It's a compromise, right? It's
sometimes it's giving up. I'll give you what you want. You're going to give me what I want if I give you what you want.
Exactly. So right there, that brings us to the next point, which many people get very murky on. What do you want? That is a great question that, whether it's in a coaching session that I have with individuals, you might find that in relationships with people, or just in life in general. What do you want? That if you don't know that, it's very hard to volley a serve to start a negotiation.
What do you want and what do you not want is equally as important in negotiation, because you might know, okay, I'm looking for a contract for $500,000. I'm making this up. I want to walk away with this $500,000 contract, right? That's the minimum I'll go. But they might be giving you a $1 million contract, and you're going to come out losing if you take that, because you're just hearing the money, right? You're just saying, oh my God, I only wanted 500,000 and they're giving me $1 million. But the conditions under which you take that contract could put you out of business. And that happens in federal. I think when people have federal and government contracts, they get this big contract for, $10 million, right? And under that, it'll say, you realize you'll need to hire maybe 200 people to deliver on that contract. Where if you were on the corporate side and you got a 10 million contract, you might only need 10 people. And having 200 people, you have to pay their salaries, you have to do all these things. It might cost you more than that contract is worth. And I've seen people almost go out of business because they take contracts that they shouldn't have. But they didn't know their limitations. They didn't do the pre-work. Right? So you have to know what you can do and you have to know what you can't do.
That's brilliant. And what it brings up in me also is that in negotiation, one of the things that I could remember back in my insurance days, to your point, is many people prematurely go into things, even in putting out that demand or the request, they don't know what the ceiling is. They don't know what's possible.
The floor, ceiling or floor.
Right, right. And so I have had situations where, for example, say my authority to negotiate a case was, I don't know, 250,000. The attorney comes in with, I'm looking for 150,000. Oh, I just saved 100,000. Now I have my ethics. So, that's another conversation. But do you see where I'm saying? All of a sudden the person was here, 250. You come in at 150. Oh, okay. They're going to drop down to where you are. It's very hard to pedal up, right?
But you
In
have
terms of
to
your demand.
understand, you just said it, the ceiling and the floor, right? The floor is the lowest that you could go and still make money. Or if you go below that, you're going to be losing money, right? So if you don't already do your calculations and say, okay, they're asking for 150, that's got to be a no. I already know I need 175 minimum to break even on this project. How am I going to be taking 150? No, that's the answer. Now, on the other end, you have to start thinking, is there an opportunity to extend this contract? If I take this 150 or 175, whatever my floor is, are there additional opportunities that I can make up that money, whether in the long term or short term? Is there another service I can bring to them that will help me make my original quota that I needed to make? And you have to start looking at the full picture, not just that little piece of it, right?
Oh, I love that. So really, you have to understand the true value, right? The true value, and that's done, as you had said earlier, through your research, through your benchmark, thinking through the scenarios, understanding your budget, understanding the legal requirements and the implications. You have to know what's possible, and possibilities can go both ways. It's not always positive and it's not always negative, right?
Understand your old company's insurance. Those millions of negotiations that you used to do, insurance is one of the biggest parts of a deal. You can go in as a small company to negotiate with a corporation and they like, oh, I have a $50,000 project. Oh my God, this is so exciting. And then they tell you have to get $1 million worth of insurance, which is going to cost you $50,000, right? So are you making money? Are you going to take that? Or are you going to negotiate that insurance down with them because you can?
Absolutely. Because so it's understanding the calculations, right? Of everything that's involved, really.
Yes, because insurance was our biggest cost, besides employees. We paid a lot of insurance, but that's spread around a lot of corporations. It's not just dependent on one contract. If we had to have $10 million worth of insurance, it's for the company, and we're dealing with, 10, 20 Fortune 500 companies, right? So you walk in, yes, we have insurance. It's a quick yes. We don't have to worry about it. But if you're a little guy and it's your first gig and they're, throwing you a bone like 50,000 and you're like, oh my God, I only made 10,000 in my business last year. You are apt to say yes, you're so excited, but start asking them about the other components of that deal and start negotiating those components. For example, if your insurance is if they're asking for like $1 million or $2 million and it's going to cost you the 50,000, you can say to them, I'm a small company. There's no insurance company that's going to give me that because my company is not worth that.
Mm-hmm.
And this project that I'm doing, even if I mess it up, it's not worth $1 million. So I can get $250,000 worth of insurance for X amount, and I can take this project and deliver it. But you have to know how to negotiate.
You do. And, you're bringing up a very good point, because I think sometimes people overlook the fine print or the obligations that come along with when they negotiate, that you have to have the insurance. So people sometimes I mean, I would hope the company would ask you for it, but if they don't, sometimes people don't actually deliver on that, right? And then things arise later, and then you pay the price then, right? So part of negotiation is keeping your end of the deal, whatever is discussed, but to your point, preliminary understand what is required, right? I think that's really important. So Sandi, you had made a point, and actually you taught me something around, and I hope I'm saying it right, BATWA? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
BATNA.
BATNA.
No.
I know I'm spelling something else. Go ahead. Say it so we can hear it clear. I'm like speaking another language. What
Best
is it?
alternative to a negotiated agreement is what is it you'll accept if you're not getting your way? You go in with certain ideas, this is what I want. I expect them to counter. What if something totally out of the blue happens, changes everything, and you're like, I don't know if I could accept that. Maybe I should. You should already know that. You should already know what is the least amount. We talked about ceiling and floor. What is the least amount I can accept? Or if I can't get that deal, is there another part of the deal I could move them towards that I know I can get? Like, you already have to have all of this down, because it's not always in negotiations. It doesn't go the way that you plan. We were laughing a minute ago about that, bringing Joe into the room. Oh, yeah. When you think you're solid and they bring another person with another perspective into the room, and that goes askew because I didn't plan on that. You have to be prepared for that.
You have to be prepared both with strategy and mindset. But let me start first. I'm holding back my laugh, right? Because I told you that in my early career, I worked in insurance. And I dealt with a lot of people. I negotiated a lot of cases, whether it was directly, pro se with the client. Many of them, probably 90% of them had attorneys, and then some went to trial, right? So you would negotiate actually in the courtroom or the courthouse. But anyway, back to strategy is that you have to understand that the other side has, if they're good, they have a strategy. And sometimes that strategy is not always grounded in ethics or values. We would hope that it is, because like I told you, if I find a sniff that it's not, I'm going to walk away. But in the case where I was a negotiator, I'm going to just call it like it is. I hate to use the word lunacy, but I dealt with some lunatics sometimes where for their tactic, they felt that if they talked loud or they were colorful or they yelled or they were threatening, that you would cave. You know what I mean? So it's really understanding that that person has a strategy, but it's important, and I'll pass it to you, Sandi, to talk also about your own strategy, because as we were saying, it does require a mindset. It does require forethought. It does require you thinking, if you have the luxury of thinking through the strategy, but sometimes you have to turn on a dime in real time, right? And so you have to continue to keep in mind and hold in mind, it's a strategic process as well, that you're looking for a certain outcome, but you're flexible. So you're so right that absolutely we have to devise a strategy, right? And that strategy is something that requires forethought for you to really pre-think going into negotiation, but understand that a negotiation has twists and turns, and that it's often, well, it isn't often, it is always in real time, right? And so you always have to be recalibrating in the moment, going back to what your strategy is, responding to the next person, right, who's coming in regards to where you're going. And that is absolutely being strategic.
It is, but sometimes you can't even anticipate some of these things. Yes. You just can't anticipate it, but you have to be good enough or know yourself or your team enough to just say, stop. If you're bringing in another person is coming into this meeting, then you might say, well, with this other person's perspective, I'll need a little bit more time. If you say, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow, you talk to this person, oh, we'll get right back to you tomorrow. Somebody else comes in and brings in a whole different level of thought that you don't go ahead and still say, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. Say, I'll need a little bit more time to think this through because we hadn't taken this into consideration. And so, but you have to be fair on both sides. If it's a good thing that's going to make you look, then if you feel you can say yes, then say yes. But if it's something that can totally put you off, then take the time, ask for the time. And they also will recognize that this person's really thinking about it, or they're going to take the time to think about this, right?
Yes, yes. And I think, in business, sometimes you're right, take the deal, especially if it's a great deal. But I think in a career or even in a personal life sphere, that pause has power, right? There
Absolutely.
is a reason why they say sleep on it, because you might bring in another factor, when you wake up in the morning, or you might think differently, or you might be like, you know what? I actually don't really want that.
Talk to a lawyer about that one.
Mhm. Yeah, so timing and taking the time to process is very important. But you also said something very interesting, which I was laughing about earlier before we came on, about what can happen on the other side, because just as you're being strategic, the other side has their antics and tactics as well. And, I said that I worked in insurance, and I have to say that I met a lot of people, but some of the things that I encountered was over the top, almost like in the realm of being like a lunatic, where I would have people that would scream at the top of their voice, storm out, get very overly dramatic. And guess what? It was all their antic or their tactic to get what they wanted. And so I said earlier about my own values, that if I find people are that way, I shut down and I close the conversation to come back to, let's have a real conversation, not a dramatic conversation, right? But just understand that we never know what's coming out the gate, right? When it comes to a negotiation.
Let me tell you, this is a very, very short story. So Peggy and I, again, Peggy and Sandi, the mighty duo, we went into an insurance company, I think it was. Nothing but old white men were in the room. We were the two females, and we were there to sell our business, and they called us gals. This is how it started. You gals, and there was one woman that was in the room originally, and she had on a skirt suit, where I abandoned skirt suits like a long time before that and just had pantsuits. But in this company, in that late age, they just didn't wear pantsuits like around the guys. And so we went in decked out in our pantsuits. And we knew how the conversation was going to go when they started calling us gals, and we're negotiating for this contract. And then there came a time where we were doing really well, and they said, well, when is your boss coming to meet up to sign the contract? Mm-hmm. And we're the CEOs, we're the bosses, and they didn't recognize us as the boss. So how do you continue with this negotiation when they're looking for clearly a man to come in and negotiate? We decided we're gonna pause. We said, we'll bring him back when we come. And we quickly ran back to the office, and we grabbed one of the guys that was working with us and said, we're coming to a meeting with us the next time.
Wow. So it's interesting because surely belittling, right? But you have to wonder, is that their tactic? Is that how they really are from a culture standpoint?
They clearly figured one Black woman and one white woman could not be the CEOs of this company. It wasn't a joke. This is the mindset that they were in. And so we recognize that, and we're like, well, what do? We can trick them or, play their game and bring a white guy. they're not asking me who the white guy is. So we brought a white guy to the meeting and they said, oh, your secret weapon, you brought your secret weapon. And we said, yes. And so every time they asked the guy a question, he would say, well, Sandi, why don't you answer that? And, or Peggy, why don't you answer that? And then we won the contract and we signed the contract and they were in shock.
Well, how Machiavelli of you that was your
Wasn't. They pushed that, right? They clearly asked a question. Now we could have taken it and be outraged and said, hey, we're women and this is our company and whatever. But we just said, just give them what they want. They're the client. Let's just give them, they want a guy, we'll give them a guy. But who's the money coming to? And who are they going to have to deal with when this is signed? And that's what we did. Yes, that's what we did, audience. We did it.
That is at another level of savviness. That's for another conversation. That's for an advanced primer chat.
But that's thinking on the fly. This is an unforeseen event that's taking place in your negotiation that you had no plan. Like, this is so out of left field. We just couldn't do it. And the only thing to do is pause, is just stop. Right? And then we went back. How do we address this? How do we get outraged? You know, I'm quick to, my mouth is like that. So when you're in negotiation, you have to suppress all of that and just start thinking on both sides. You've got to pivot on a dime. So in that moment, my outrage could have cost us a contract, because I would have been like, who do you think you are? Because we're little women, you're calling us gals, and we could have gone off, but we kept our cool and we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you.
Well, I love where this went, Sandi, because it goes back to the second point we raised. What do you want? So you could have allowed your ego to rear its head, where you might walk out thinking, I'm not a gal, but you wanted the contract. You wanted the financial benefit.
And we knew it would benefit our team. We knew we had the people that could deliver on that. And so, yes, I wanted that contract, and we got it.
Wow, that's a very powerful story. So, okay, so we talked about a lot. And we really have come back to the theme, the question that we asked, that negotiation is really in all aspects. It's in our everyday life, and that it's not just about that transaction, right? That I have to say, it's really about people. And so I think the one thing we didn't touch upon, or I'd like to go a little bit deeper on, is the art of negotiation, which is about the people and about not the what you're negotiating, but how. And coming back to the fact that it is about a win-win. It is about compromising without compromising yourself, right? And it is about people walking away feeling that they got out something, that there are no losers, because then I think that just creates a bad feeling. And then remember, with the negotiation is the entry point to the relationship. And so we have to keep that in mind as well, right?
People look at how you negotiate. They take that into consideration. Are you a good negotiator? I mean, sometimes we walk away going, they should have negotiated that. Like, I can't understand what kind of company that didn't negotiate that particular thing. We negotiated with everybody else, but this company, either they're not on the ball. Now, I can look at it as a way of my teaching them something later on after we got this and we're working on it. We can mention, hey, you didn't negotiate so-and-so. Can you tell us why or why not? Or sometimes the person didn't know to do it. If you have a new person, new in job, if it's something they didn't negotiate that we think it can come back to bite us, we'll mention it. You're like, hey, by the way, this is what's typical in other companies. Do you want to check this out? Or because that's a win-win for you too. If you can help that person do their job and get to a point where it's not going to be controversial later, then that's a win for you as well. So win comes in all different forms.
Win comes in all different forms. And I have a personal story and then I have a client story to reinforce this point that it is really important, I'll say it again, to understand the big picture when it comes to negotiating. So this is my story. Very early in my career, when I was transitioning from insurance into the marketing realm, I got a job in DC. I was so, how as my mom would say, gleeful. I was over the moon in the moment. The CEO, I'm in his office and he offers me the job. And what do I do in my young, fresh state? I say yes. Only to recognize 6 months later, when I was talking to a recruiter, she's like, you're paid like $50,000 below where you should be based on all that the work that you're doing. I mean, I was doing all this work, promoting George W. Bush for a convention, writing copy, negotiating, getting on the phone, getting sponsors to contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to this nonprofit. Yeah. So that was my story that I said I would never again, ever, I don't care how good it sounds, say yes in the moment. But also I wonder, why did that person offer me something that was way below where I should be? I won't know the answer, but that lesson was about me, not about that person. The second thing is I had a client actually who negotiated her salary to the point that guess what happened? The company rescinded the offer because they thought that she went too far, which is interesting because, everything communicates. And I wonder what message she took away from that, right? But also, how is the culture at the company who says, I'm going to withdraw your offer because you asked for too much?
So there are a lot of thoughts I have around that. Diversity is a big thing. Was she asking for a fair amount of money that other people might be getting, whether color, whether gender, whether maybe she did her research and that's what the job offered. But for whatever reason, they might not want to give it to her because, hey, white people make more than black people. She's asking for a white person's salary. I mean, these are things that actually happen. And so it's not necessarily that she did the wrong thing. It might have been to her benefit to say no and keep negotiating. If they're not meeting what you want and that's what you're worth and what your value is, and they don't want to pay that, they might pay it to the next person who comes along.
Yeah, so sometimes people do us favor in unforeseen ways, right? But to your point, like I said, the negotiation is the gateway or entryway to the relationship. So who knows what was in their head or what was true in terms of what they could pay, because maybe they had a bell curve and maybe some people were at the top, or maybe they felt like she needed time to graduate up that ladder. Who knows? But I would definitely say that was a strong signal about what was to come for her, right? And so, yeah, we have great stories about how negotiation really can unfold. So, Sandi, any additional words before we kind of give the summary?
I know we have to wrap up, but I want to say negotiation can be by email. We've talked a lot about in person. It could be by email. It could be in other forms. And when it's in written format, you could just be sending an email, or it could be a contract. And, when you get that contract, have a lawyer look at it. Pay to have someone who's an expert look at it for you, because it's very different. What you spoke to the person about might not what's written in the contract. And the written word has nuances to it as well. So make sure you're clear, you get clarity on everything. If you don't understand something, go back and ask and say, can you clarify and make sure that this is very clear in the contract? Because once you sign off on it, let's say you're doing a 10-year contract. You're going to be stuck with that for 10 years, especially if it's not in your best interest. So just wanted to put that out there, but we can recap our takeaways and just make sure everyone understands where we're coming from.
Yes, and just to put the cherry on what you said, you know, many times people say what the medium is the message, but in the case of negotiation, as you were saying, that it can happen on multiple channels, that your channel is not the message, it's what you have agreed and what is written and what comes along with the relationship that is the message.
Sign off on.
What you sign off on. Thank you for the correction. Is the message. So yeah, so I'll start with what I'm taking away, made a couple notes here that again, that the negotiation is really baked in self-knowledge. You have to begin with self-knowledge of what your values, what do you value? And we talked about you might be going through the motions of those values, but pause, take the time to know what are my values? What do I really care about, right? What do I want? And to understand that there's somebody else on the other side that's just as motivated as you. So to take the time, and I won't, you know, go there in terms of the recap, because I know you're going to do a little bit more on doing your reconnaissance, but I would just add that to be mindful, intentional, and strategic. And I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let you give your list.
The last one is be prepared to walk away. You know, you said keep your options open, but one of your options is to walk away, is to say no. We talked about understanding your BATNA, understanding your floor. What is it that you'll take? And if it doesn't become you or won't benefit your company, get up and walk away and say no. Sometimes that's a win. Sometimes you're winning and you don't even know it by saying no to something. So I think we should all keep a clear mind when we're in negotiation with someone. And I try to predict the outcome. Of course, you want it favorable to yourself, but keep it in the back of your head that the best thing for me to do in this deal might be to not get this deal.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So, all right. So again, you know, we're ending here, but how can they reach us, right? So they can definitely reach me at bold@audreydlloyd.com.
And I'm Sandi at SANDI@sandiwebster.com. Very easy to get me. And on LinkedIn, it's also Sandi Webster.
Great. Well, good seeing everyone. I mean, you can't see us, but we can see you. But good being here. Good being here. Have a great day and great night, good evening, and see you again.
Until the next primer chat.
Bye-bye.